Good evening, everybody. Matt Geary for the Geek Pride cast on this Sunday evening. We have another guest with us. We're on a roll, guest every week for the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks. It's all good. So with me, as always, we have Peter Ray Allison.
Good evening, everyone.
Mark Canty.
Good to see you all.
And our special guest tonight, Chloe Mashiter.
Hello.
Welcome, Chloe. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your time. So, first up, who are you? What do you do? There's the question. Why are you here? What's your what do you do?
Who am I? Why am I here?
Yeah.
These sound just like incredibly ominous or like the deepest philosophical questions. I am a tabletop game maker. I am a GM for live streams and staged events and open gaming events. I also have played on live streams and things like that. And my background kind of outside of games is in interactive theatre, so like street games and immersive interactive game-based shows. So obviously that kind of feeds in a lot to game stuff. And I make games as Roll Flip Draw on itch, and I'm also one of the founders of Adventurers Wanted, who do a lot of predominantly D&D live streams, but sometimes various other systems. So I think, does that kind of cover who am I, why am I here,
yeah,
what am I doing?
It's very comprehensive. Hello to Faze on Twitch, welcome. So what, you make games, what sort of games have you made, or is there anything we might be aware of?
I don't know if it's going to be stuff that you're aware of, but my most recent game, which has definitely been the most kind of lovingly received, is a game called Time Heist.
Oh, okay.
Where you basically players play as a series of criminals who are trying to steal the world's first time travel machine. It's a very difficult job, but luckily they have the help of their future selves who have already stolen the machine in the future, so can come back to help with the time heist now. So some of my games are quite just silly, fun, kind of one and done games, and then there's slightly more emotional or weird ones. There's a game I'm releasing tomorrow, or rather it's 6 games. It's called Otherworld, and it's basically a set of 6 very different one-player games that are all set in like a kind of Twilight Zone world, but like one's card-based, one's journaling, one's an audio game, but they're all forms of role-playing games. So it's lots of different bits and pieces. If anyone's ever heard of the Uncaged anthology, I also wrote one of the adventures for Volume 3. It was for the lowest level adventurers, so it was right at the front of the book, which I was very pleased with, even though it means nothing kind of quantitatively. But yeah, that's the kind of bits and pieces that I do.
So the sort of these are all tabletop games, I'm assuming, yes?
Yes, like the only thing that kind of probably isn't tabletop is that one audio game. But it's still role playing. But the majority of the stuff that I do is tabletop.
Okay, and do you have a sort of what's the word? Do you have a preference in the type of games you play? Now, myself and no doubt Mr. Canty below me have a preference in our miniature wargaming. What do you have? European type games. What do you go for? What floats your boat?
I'll say that like quite a bit of what floats my boat has shifted since what I'm going to generically call lockdown, just like since the start of March, because I was playing, for instance, in maybe like 7 different D&D campaigns and such like. I'm fortunate that I have a lot of friends who are DMs, so lots of chances to play where I don't necessarily have to DM. But since then, actually, especially because of doing stuff remotely, I'm now very into quite mechanics light campaign systems or one-shot systems. So stuff like Quest or stuff like Fiasco, Grant Howitt's one-pagers, things that are very much, it's more about the choices that you want to make as a player rather than the things that your character might mechanically be capable of doing. if that makes sense as a
Yeah,
distinction.
yeah.
And being able to be a bit more freewheeling and worrying less about kind of really crunchy mechanics when I'm already spending a lot of energy dealing with like screen time, has probably been why I'm currently most feeling games like that.
Okay. I am very much into if it doesn't have nice sort of miniatures and the rules don't sort of, if the game doesn't take you 25 hours and there's like numerous rules and lots of nice little miniatures and a big board and things, I generally am not interested. But conversely, I never thought I would get into sort of kind of little fast card games, but the game The Resistance, I love it. I love that game. And it's basically the card version of Among Us, if you play Among Us online and stuff, which is a big thing at the minute. But it's like Mafia and Werewolf, I think, and stuff like that. But I love that game. I love it. It's just sort of, it's very quick, and yeah, it's amazing for parties and stuff. But in general, it's miniature based games, and they have to be kind of complicated, or I generally am not interested.
Yeah, I run the tech for a live stream of Werewolf, and I have every single week since the start of lockdown. And so once a week I just sit down and like study people lying to each other. It's been really fascinating. And I'd hoped that it had made me better at Werewolf, but I played it a couple of weeks back and I was still just as transparent and gullible as ever.
Yeah, you get games like that, you have to sort of you have to have a constant sort of game face throughout if you are them or not. Like if you're in Resistance, if you're a Resistance member or if you're not, you literally got to do the same thing throughout, because you start showing tells and that's when you get it, and that's, it's game over. I find you also get if you're the imposter or the Resistance member or the werewolf, too often people hold grudges, and then when you're not, they're like, it's definitely you, and say, it's not me this time, I promise, you said that last time. And I was like yeah. So it ruins friendships. Like I remember having a game at a dinner party once, and my mate was there with his wife, and they were getting really into it, and he just basically turned around to her and said, I swear to God, if you're it, then our wedding is over. Our relationship is over. She said, it's not me, it was her, but it was so amusing. So good. When you release your games, do you do it like, do you do Kickstarter? How do you do it?
Currently I just release them on itch or on DriveThruRPG. They're only digital copies.
Okay.
I'm currently, there's a really wonderful thing called the Tabletop Mentoring Program, which links up basically just anyone who is kind of part of or wants to be part of the tabletop making community with people that might have a bit more experience in certain areas. And my current mentorship is because there is a game that I want to make that's a little bit more involved and going to require a bit more work. And I'm looking at Kickstarter or crowdfunding in order to do that currently. That's like my big thing for next year, is shifting, not necessarily like away from digital only self-published stuff, but getting into like some kind of bulkier games that I want to make.
Is that intimidating for you, going from sort of digital to suddenly something tangible?
Oh god, yeah. Massively so. Partially because something that's been really nice in like lockdown, because theatre and live performance, which was everything I did, really disappeared. Making like digital PDF versions of games and such like was something that was so accessible for me to do. And like even just I was looking at like card printing finances and like the customs of sending packages to different countries, and my head was spinning. So I'm very thankful for the mentorship program, because if it was just me like scrabbling around, thankfully there's a lot of nice people that I know in tabletop who are more than happy to kind of like help others out and chat about their experiences, so that you can make new mistakes, but you at least won't make the mistakes they made.
our very own Bevan Clatworthy. He has released a game with Tinker called Tinkerbot Games, I think. They released a game called Ghostel successfully on Kickstarter a few years back, and they've got a new one coming out soon. Yeah, or is it out now? Is it out now? Well, it's called Haunt Culture, which is basically a spiritual successor to Ghostel. And yeah, it amazes me because they're super into it. Like, they have days dedicated to just game testing and doing stuff. And I sat there and I talked to him the other day about a game that I wanted to do, and I've been wanting to do it for years. But I just don't have the as much as I like complicated games and stuff, the concept of getting, you know, a designer in and getting somebody to do boxes and then somebody to do this and then all the things that could go wrong. Like we did some Kickstarters for charity, some charity Kickstarters and stuff for Geek Pride, and they were stressful enough just to get things for people, and then, you know, things go wrong and then people are moaning about stuff and you're just like and it's just, the whole thing's just so, it's overwhelming, you know. And it's so I feel the pain. Braver than I, basically, because so I've got a lot of respect for anybody who does something like that, anybody who can sort of release a game or go into that, because I'd love to be able to do it. But one, I've got the fear that it would fail, and two, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
I've got a friend who he works with me. I work in e-commerce during the day, helping people to do various things. And he's bought basically Lock, Stock and Barrel, a company that sells dice and figures and things like that. Because the guy who owns it originally has a manufacturing business for dice, but he never really made much of it. And he let someone else run it for him, and the guy ran it into the ground. So he bought this company. And then he had to explain to his wife he had to buy a unit. And now he's talking to me saying, so we've got all these figures and all these things. And I was thinking, I might like to look at doing some rule publishing and stuff like that. You like writing, don't you? I was like, yes. He goes, so you just write some rules? I was like, we need to have a long chat. Some of that, and it may involve some very short words and some very long words. But yes, it does interest me. No, I'm not going to pull a full game system out of my backside, fully formed. Yes, it will be horrendously torturous and painful. And no, I'm not doing all the work. And he just went quiet. I went, okay.
I would love it if you were asked to just kind of write some rules and you were like, sure. And then you just send over a PDF of just various unrelated, disconnected rules that just exist outside of anything.
We had a group. We've got a group. Me and a few friends. Ben Fee from Geek Pride. Paul Gibson. He used to do stuff for Geek Pride. Was on another podcast called Game Overcast. My mate John Marsden.
And Matt might have just vanished.
Have I
Matt,
gone?
you've gone silent.
Oh no, I don't. It's OBS
I
again.
suspect we're having issues with OBS.
Again.
Right.
Yeah, it's gone red. Oh, we're back. I'm back. I'm
Yes,
back.
you're back, Matt.
Yeah. The evil OBS red square turned up, and I was like, no, but I could hear you, so it wasn't internet access.
Stressful things to see.
Yeah, it's just like, oh no. But yeah, sorry. Myself, Ben Fee, Paul Gibson, and John Marsden, we had this sort of like little group, and we were going to call ourselves Oubliette Games. We had a little logo and stuff, and we were going to sort of, and we had all these amazing ideas, and even like Ben was so good. Like Ben Fee is an amazing games master. You know, for anybody, if you want to do Dungeons and Dragons or Rogue Trader or any RPG thing, he's amazing. So good at it. So good. And he came up with like so many different games. He came up with like these card games, like this elemental card game that we had, and he had this sort of like card based like gunslinging game and stuff, and he had all these things, and we went through this for about a couple of months of being super into it, and then life just got in the way. And every now and again we come up with you'll hear a message that hasn't, we haven't talked to each other in that group for about 3 or 4 months, and somebody go, what about a game about teddy bears, but you have to sort of basically save the child from being sort of taken by monsters and getting woken up and scared and stuff, and you're a teddy bear under the bed and blah blah blah. And I was just like, that's such a good idea, but we, other than the idea of it, we haven't really done a lot with it. And it's just like, by the way, if anybody comes up with a game about teddy bears as an RPG under a bed, I'm suing right now. That's our game. And then I
Write
have
it all down, mail it to yourself, so you got some proof.
Yeah, well, it's on this podcast now. So teddy bears under bed, waking up children, blah blah blah. Don't you dare. But I've got this one that I want to do, and I was talking to Bevan about it. And it's like 4D strategic war game, but where it's like land, sea, air, and space. And I want it to be to the point where it's like it can be a small. So it could be played on a coffee table for like, skirmish type, but it could be massive, like huge. I want it to be scalable. I don't want it to be this sort of thing. And then I was saying to him, I was like, dude, it could be like a lower base game where this ties in with other things. So you could have card games, but the card games can affect the board game. So you can have tournaments where people who you're like, I play card games, so they're better at that. And you can have all these different layers to it and stuff. And he's like, wow, yeah. And I was just like, that'll be amazing. I'm not going to be able to do it, but that's the
I can
idea.
feel the rubber wallpaper and the long sleeve jackets already.
Yeah, it's just like, do you know what? I got myself. I started writing some rules. I was bored one day and I got a spreadsheet. I started writing rules, and I was writing rules for weather, and I went, wow, this is going to be so complicated. I don't know.
And that's why he loves it.
Yeah.
It's not right, Matt.
Yeah. What comes first when you're creating a game, Chloe? Is it the rules, the theme, or the idea? I mean, what to you is like the most important, the core aspect of the game?
Okay. It for me it varies game by game. Because for instance, like to take Time Heist, like I'm not gonna lie, they say the phrase time heist in Avengers Endgame, and I just thought the sound of those two words together, and I was like, there's a thing, and I know it's a thing I want to make. And then all of the playtesting of that game, the core was how do your future selves help you, and how do you get that really fun thing in time travel where you see your future self, but they're drenched to the skin, or they're covered in confetti, or they've got an injury or something, and you have to figure out, you already know the end of the story, how do you get there is the fun bit. So it was trying to figure out that core mechanic, which for me is like the core of what that game is. For other games, sometimes it's just the tone and the kind of general theme, because it's like, I just want this to be very silly and have like a lot of jokes in how it's written. And I want there's one game that I made which was kind of inspired by stuff like Galaxy Quest and Dark Place, in terms of like just badly made cult things. I'm aware that neither of those they're both like deliberately badly made things. But in there's kind of mechanics where it's like you get advantage if your character uses a skill in a way other than what it should be. So for instance, if your character, one of your character skill is guns, but you use a gun to unlock a door by shooting at it, you get advantage, because that makes no sense. And because of course a bad TV show is going to have stuff that makes no sense. So I think a lot of stuff boils down to me for like, how does mechanic express something really fun? And for me, like, obviously I'm saying mechanic because a lot of the stuff that I like to make is quite kind of condensed, aside from like the bigger projects that I'm looking forward to. And so it is mainly about like a very specific like core mechanical thing. But yeah, I think it's that kind of thing. It depends totally on each game, and it also gets more blurry with every game I make, because every game you make, it gets like a little bit easier to figure your way through, and so it gets a bit more blurred between the different aspects that when you were starting you were just going like, okay, I'm gonna Google like game design questions, and then I'm gonna go through all the questions and answer them so I know what I'm doing with game design. Yeah, that's kind of my general approach.
And one thing I found, and I don't sure if it's the same with you, but I find like there's like, I've got a lot of friends, like my friend Becca, Geek Pride Becca, and you know, other people and stuff who they're massively into their D&D, which is quite complicated. D&D, you know, as a game goes, I would say is one of the more complicated games out there. You know, it's more complicated than Warhammer, it's more complicated than some of the war games and stuff I play, but they love that game, but yet when we go to, we used to go to their house to play games and stuff, it was always short, fast games that they wanted to play, which is odd because you're playing potentially the longest game out there because, it can go on for years. But yet when you're playing at a table, it seems to be that, they just want to play short, fast card games and stuff. And I've always found that quite odd because with me, I like games to last longer because I feel like I'm getting my money's worth in a way. And it's just like, like I said, every Christmas, me and my brother play Axis and Allies, or we play some really convolutedly long game. But it's like, we feel like at the end of it, win or lose, you've had a good game out of it. And it's odd. Is it the same with you? Do you prefer playing shorter games? Like, as much as you do D&D, would you prefer just to play short games?
And to be honest, like I really enjoy like playing in campaigns, whether that's D&D or another system. Partially because like I love the kind of stories that you have with characters over that long a time. I love the slow burn and the payoff that you get. And like I started playing, like D&D was the first tabletop game that I really started playing. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago because I wanted to do a marathon version of it at the Edinburgh Fringe. And we ended up doing a show that was 10 hours a day for 25 days to be a 250-hour campaign over the course of a month.
Wow. Wow.
It's not something that I intend to really do again. We did like 100 hours the next year to kind of thin it down a bit. We had 3 DMs on rotation. We would have people who would come in to play for an hour, or regular players who would play for slightly longer blocks. We had 2 sets of 5 hours every day just to keep this thing going. But what it did was it's like the scale and size of the story we got to tell over that period was awesome.
How does that work? How do you get 3 DMs telling the same story and stuff? Or is it a case of you link things together as you go along?
You make sure that the story you're telling is very much there are people on a ship who have things they have to do. And today, this is the thing they're doing, and tomorrow, this is the thing they're doing. That's kind of part of a larger thing, but it's very much, here's a number of MacGuffins that people need to get to achieve this final thing.
All right, so they can't sabotage the whole thing by doing something stupid. It's just like, little part. It's compartmentalized, basically. Yeah,
it was trying to like think about like the actual game was very much designed with the fact that it was going to be that structure in mind, and also like a big bulk was written before the month, but quite a lot, especially like the ending, because some very unpredictable things, as happens in D&D, happened, and then the final section was written kind of off the back of everything that had gone beforehand. So yeah, I love that kind of scale of stuff. What I'll say is about shorter games, what I really get out of them is, because a lot of the short games that I play are still kind of often like dice, pen and paper role-playing games. But what's really lovely is doing those like quick callbacks and trying to make something that feels actually really satisfying in a short amount of time. Definitely if I'm running them, then I don't feel like I'm having to plan as much, and I am purely responding to what the players are doing, rather than thinking in the back of my head, stat block for this thing, and don't forget I'm trying to like make this person's backstory from 3 episodes pay off like soon. So it very much depends what kind of a mood I'm in, but I'd say that mood is more about like, do I want to get deeply emotionally engaged with something today, in which case like a session of a longer thing is great, or do I want to just like dip my toe in and have just like a very kind of like in and out play around, I guess, is what I tend to go for.
How do you so you talked about reacting to players. Now I have dabble. I have decided. I threw my gauntlet into the ring, the D&D, the DM ring, and the D&D ring because I haven't played D&D since I was a kid. Recently, I started off with a one shot, which worked quite well. I ran I ran a false hydra. If you've ever used a false hydra before.
As a player, I've fought a hydra, but I think it was slightly homebrewed by the DM.
Right. If you ever get a chance, get somebody to run a false hydra for you, because don't read it. Don't look into it. Just get somebody who knows about it to do it, because it's sort of. Have you ever played Call of Cthulhu?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's more about investigation, and it's more about dealing with weird things that are going on, and about you figuring out how to deal with that situation. It's not about shooting fireballs, Peter, at things that you probably shouldn't be shooting fireballs at.
In my defense, we had warned the GM that when someone next sees that head,
don't spoil it. She doesn't know yet.
Don't spoil it. Well, I'm basically, we'll see something. I will do fireball. We saw something. My mage cast fireball, and at that point, the GM had said, "No. If that happens,
you're dead.
You dare. You all die."
Yeah.
And I mean, actually, that's been the question I've been wanting to ask you. It's like, in this 250-hour-long campaign, how on earth did you keep the players on plot?
Okay, so I'm speaking as I basically coordinated the entire thing and ran it behind the scenes. I was sometimes playing, but I wasn't DMing, because I was there making sure like we had enough players for the equivalent of 1,000 player hours, and stuff like that. But in terms of how we kept people on plot, some stuff was just the DMs using their tricks and such, like where genuinely, your god, suddenly you can hear your god in your head who just goes, "Do you really think that's a good idea?" And just like kind of pushing hard on that. Other times, the way that we structured it was there were always there'd be 4 players on stage. 2 of them were people who we knew who were also doing things at the Fringe, but knew what D&D was, and then 2 of them were people who'd bought tickets, who sometimes were people who've played since first edition. Sometimes there were people who had never played it before, and everything in between. And one of the reasons we had the 2 regular players, as we called them, which was made up of a group of various people, they didn't know what they needed to do, or they hadn't been given cheat codes or anything, but part of their job was just to help out any new players, and also make sure that whilst we had loads of fun and people had freedom to do stuff, things didn't go just wildly off the rails, as they might have done if we'd put a DM with 4 people who didn't know each other and potentially didn't know the game.
I wonder what that's like. Been there, done that.
Oh yeah.
Dude, what are you talking about, Matt?
We had our first session. We basically had Pete, and Pete knew Mark, but there was Mark's friend Dave. There was one of our other mates, and my brother, and a girl called Danny, our neighbour, and nobody knew each other. So we basically had people with all these backstories that went on about how they didn't trust each other and how they were sort of loners and things like this. So when we got to the first dungeon, they all just ran off like scattered cats into the ether, and started setting off traps and things without looking for them. And I was just like, what the hell's going on? And they're just sort of kind of going everywhere and kind of going, I'm not listening to you because I'm my own person and I don't trust people, and therefore I'm going to do this. And I was like, oh my god, this is going to be the shortest game of D&D ever.
We survived.
I think you got downed by a massive spider in the first.
I got sat on by a giant spider. Yes.
Yeah.
Big, mean, scary Warforged getting squished by a spider's butt.
Oh man.
Still not as good as the paladin striding off along a corridor and setting off 5 traps.
Yeah.
While we're being told by someone, oh, there's definitely 2 traps down that corridor. 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, it's how do you you talked about reacting to your players. You talked about reacting to them. One thing that I found when I was doing it, I would write reams and reams and reams and reams and reams of storyline, and they'd never do any of it, or they do something, they get a critical fail, and I couldn't give it to them, so it was all wasted. So I found that I was starting to just react to things they were doing. I'd have general plot themes, and then I would just react and see what happened. Is that the best way to do it? Is that the best way to GM?
Oh god, I'd say, like, my initial instinct is it's the best way to GM if that results in the most fun for you and your players, which might sound like a cop-out answer. But because I've GM'd in a fair few different contexts. So like for just home games, where I think I'm now much more of the opinions, partially because I'm running systems like Quest, which are a lot lighter mechanically, and so you don't have to keep as much kind of mechanics info in your head. It's much easier to be like, oh yeah, sure, you're fighting X, Y, and Z things that you've suggested you might be fighting, because it's incredibly easy for me to just say immediately what they can do. With a system like that, and in home games, I try to kind of just have like little beats or ideas of, oh, don't forget there's an interesting opportunity to be had with this person's backstory, etc. And then just see what people do. Like, I've done very indulgent things in home games where, just because we've enjoyed it, like suddenly, because someone said they wanted to buy a map from the map store, okay, we're spending 45 minutes in the map store with the map man, and here's all the made up map lore because he found the prime map, which is the map of all maps. And if you want a map of anything in the world, including like where are all the members of the secret society right now, then he has the map if you've got the money. In home games, I will totally do that and respond to players in that kind of a way. If I'm doing something that is for a stream or for a live audience, normally I've thought a bit more about like the 3 pillars, because I kind of want each show, if possible, to have at least some social, some exploration, some combat. If there's, you know, it might still be very weighted towards one or the other, but it's nice to have a bit of them in. And because, and this is all my own fault, for like live shows and stream shows, I've either gone very heavily action, because I was doing a stream set in Eberron, and I was like, okay, they're going to be on an airship and they have to get on a train, and it's going to be like that kind of thing, and there's like vibes of Speed and Mission Impossible and fighting in skyscrapers and stuff, and like very heavy on that tone, where it was quite, I was responding to a lot of like individual small suggestions from players, but because the situation they were in was very timed as characters, because you've got to get on this airship, and then from this airship you've got to do this, it became much more about how did they do the thing rather than whether they did do it. And then with the other stream that I still currently run, there's been so much of like mystery and slow burn that I do keep notes of just being like, don't forget about this NPC, or this is, normally I try to go like, what's a potential story beat for each character that I know that if I want to, I can drop in, because it's a message from a family member or a visitation from a god, or it's them just remembering they've got XYZ in their pocket, which is a meaningful item. So the way that I kind of like plan and respond to players kind of changes depending on the context that I'm DMing for. Though I definitely started out, say the stream that I currently run, Under Gods, I started that out with a lot more intense planning. And definitely the ones that I've planned the least have been probably my most fun to run, because it felt like there was more room to respond to people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's all very much about the specific context for me.
I I really enjoy it. It's something that I took from, again, my DM. I say my DM, the guy Ben Fee, who sort of he's run games for us and stuff. He did this thing where if people couldn't make show, or just couldn't make a Sunday when we used to do it, or if we were doing things apart from each other just to make sure everybody was involved, he'd do text adventures with you. So he'd send you messages over on your phone and stuff, and I took that on board. So with these guys, we do text adventures as well. So basically, it started off as you would, if you were doing something like if it was downtime and you wanted to go to the shop, or you wanted to do something in town, something that wasn't interesting for a stream, we'd just go, right, well, we'll do it in the text adventure. We have a role-playing chat, we'll just do it there. But that sort of started getting into like things where stuff, really significant things were happening, and we had some pretty emotional points within the text adventures themselves, simply because you had more time to think about it. Like, I personally had more time to think about it. I didn't have the act on the cuff. I could sit there and I could really put all my into it and not have to sort of worry about boring people because they were just waiting for me to sort of kind of reply. And I kind of preferred that in a way, because you could really, really go deep with it. And like we had a text battle. We had a full battle on a bridge through text message, which was really good. Worked really well, because the battle, we didn't do the fight, and it was literally, there was two sides fighting each other, and it was what the PCs were doing to manipulate the battle and help with it and stuff. So if they made fails, then their side got pushed back. If they won things, then they got pushed forward, and stuff like that. And it worked really well, because you can sort of fully engage it. And I think people can get behind RP role playing a bit more when it's text message, because they don't feel, maybe you feel a bit stupid doing it on a stream or doing it in real life. But if you're behind a phone, you can really get into it. And my neighbor Danny, because she's really into the text message stuff, like really gets into it and stuff. And if you don't do text message stuff, I think you should give it a go, because it really helps. I think, especially sort of tie things together.
Yeah, that sounds like such. It sounds like such a cool way to go about those things. And I totally get what you mean about having more time, and for some people it feeling less self-conscious.
Yeah.
A friend of mine runs a free-form TTRPG, and I'm slowly getting my head around getting into play that, because I know that just all my time will go into just being a fisherwoman in a coastal town, just using the game just to be calm. But the descriptions that I've had of like gaming by text and stuff like that isn't something that I've done much, but I'm so keen to do more of. Because it sounds just like a really lovely way of getting into things in a different way.
Yeah, you can do roles and stuff. All you need, like what I do is, I just put up, like, if I'm on my phone, sometimes it's a bit more footery, but you can do screenshots. Or if I'm on my computer, then I've got WhatsApp on web, or we might use Discord going forward. But you just do screenshots of the roles. You do the roles for them, unless they're on Roll20 themselves. And you just do it that way, and it works really well. And like, people, I think they get really sort of kind of engaged in it, because it is more storyline based than it is, and they sort of I actually enjoy it more, because I feel sometimes when I'm doing the streams, I'll have a basic storyline, but because they tend to not do what I want them to do, I have to make up things on the fly, and I'm not overly quick-witted, so I have to sort of really think about it. So text messages has worked for me quite well, so I can just sit there and think about it, go, well, this might happen, or this might happen, this is pretty evil, I could do this, and then so that's sort of I'm not a vindictive DM. I'm very much trying to keep my guys alive, to a point, but if they do stupid stuff, then there's not much you can really do. You just gotta let them go.
Yeah.
If they do
mistakes.
Yeah. What's the most stupid thing anybody has done in one of your games?
I'm sure there might be something more stupid, but this is the thing that always comes to mind, because he acted it out and it made me so happy. Right when I was like just starting to play, I was running Fandelver, the starter kit, And we only got like 3 sessions in because we all had different schedules and just couldn't make it work. But in the second session, I think they were raiding some kind of, it's like a ruined castle or something where a load of goblins live, I think. If I'm starting to get lore wrong, then let me know. For some reason, I think just because of what I was doing, we established that all goblins in this world, or the ones that they were meeting, had Australian accents. And they needed to like get around them or scare them off or do something. And so this character, the character, stole this kind of bloodied like cloth or sheet from off of an altar, because they had like altars to Maglubiet, their deity, and got everyone else to hide in the shadows of this room and do stealth checks, and then kind of made loads of noise to draw the attention of these goblins. And the plan was everyone was going to cast spells as covertly as they could, and he was going to pose as their god. And the player like walked out of the actual room, came back covered, like draped like a ghost sheet, and just started shouting in an Australian accent, "I am Maglubiet." It was like, thing is, in a way, it wasn't silly because it worked, because all the rolls went their way. And I was also like, this is too glorious for me to not let you win this one, because I'm loving this so much. There's probably been like sillier things that people have done that haven't worked, but just like the out and out audacity and surprise of him doing that was just wonderful.
Peter and Mark, what is the most idiotic thing you guys have done?
Just the one.
As a group, what do you think? I have sort of kind of ideas, but what do you think is your sort of your most literally, oh my god, what do we just do moments?
Just the one. I think, well, personally for me, I think the most stupidest thing I did was the last time when my character Draken decided the best way to stop a fire spreading was by knocking down a building with him inside it.
But the thing is, yeah, it worked. The thing is, he said to me, "I'm gonna, you know the way like fire breaks in forests." I was like, "Yeah." He says, "So I'm gonna cut down this house." I was like, "Okay." So he says, "I'm gonna charge in," and I said, "So you're gonna cut down the house with you in it?" And he went, "Yes." And I was just like, and he rolled his attack, and I went, "Okay." But he did it, so he managed to chop it down and then get the dex save high enough so he could get back out without the house falling on top of him. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing, man, because I would have insta killed him had he failed that. So I was like, there was no other option. There's no way. If a house falls on top of you, there's no getting out of that. That's it. So he made it.
Well,
so
in my defense, I think it was, I was playing Dragon Bob Barbarian, which is very strong and quite fast, and also fire breathing, so therefore resistant to fire damage. I thought, it's a chance, it's a risk, but it looks cool.
I thought you fighting a shark was quite silly, to be honest. We had some sharks, and he decided to charge in and have at them one-on-one. It's like, that's so silly.
Amazing.
Again, my argument was distraction.
And Mark, what about you?
I think for humour value, possibly going back to the first meeting in the bar with the bar fight, when I tried to leap. I had some really good rolls, so I wanted to knock someone out, so I smacked him on the top of the head and just knocked him out, and while he was paying attention to the rest of the fight, and everyone's getting bogged down, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I ran over and I jumped across the bar and I stacked it, and I got up there and I took someone out, and we just got to the end, and I tried to intimidate someone and rolled a 1.
And the guy just laughed at him.
Just absolutely, yes, this is working. I'm going to be intimidating him. A 6 foot tall warforged, and I'm stood above him on the bar, and I'm face first on the floor, aren't I? That was really embarrassing.
we had one where basically we're retconning because we've got a new player coming in, so we're having to move things around. But we had a point where they spent easily a day's worth of text messages with each other describing how they were going to had this battle plan. So we had like a text adventure thing where basically they were talking in one of the towns how they were going to there was an infiltration within some of the local towns, and they needed to deal with it in a combined way so they could stop them from going underground. And they're like Lance turns around, so that's Mark's character, turns around and says, we need information, we need intel, we should infiltrate these towns and get intel and stuff. And I was like, great idea, you should do that. So they take themselves off to this town, and they take themselves off the town and just walk up the center of it. Just walk in. No disguise, no stealth, no nothing. They just walk into the center of town. The paladin walks into the blacksmith and says, I am the hero of such and such, give me free stuff. And then the rest of them are just wandering around, and I'm just like, so pretty much everybody knows who you are now and what you're doing. It's just like,
I was trying to sit on the paladin at the time, and I just kept on rolling horrendously bad rolls. So I'm like, this is really a bad. Oh, okay, let's just. Yeah, I'll just give up now. I'll just sit in the corner and nudge.
And the worst moment I've had as a DM was in the one shot, because I was there. I didn't want to kill them because it would have made a bad story and stuff. I wanted to make sure that they survived, so I was giving them benefit of the doubt for a lot of things. But when Pete's character basically cast fireball at the wrong time, I basically was describing this thing and he cast fireball at it literally just pressed the button, and I went, did you just do that? And he went, yes. And I was just like, but oh my god, I had this moment in my head where I was like, I actually have to kill them now, because I got no way around this. There's no way for me to get around this, and I had to really think fast. And it was literally a case of, I said, right, you two have got a chance to knock him out of the way before that fireball hits. If you roll a 3, if you fail, it's game over. If you don't, then it's fine. Luckily, I think it was I'm not sure if it was Ben's character or it was Kijo. Danny?
Was it? Yeah, it was. Oh, yes, because damn it, Kijo.
Yeah, that was Daniel. He managed to sort of tackle him, which only set fire to the building, but it was still, it was just like, because at that time I was just like, come on, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. If you die now, then that's it, game over. I can't do anything about it.
In my defense, it was partly a misunderstanding of what we were facing, combined with one of, right, the next time we see that, tell me, and I will cast fireball. They saw it, and then I saw cast fireball.
You were the typification of the old joke that when you give someone a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Well,
whatever we did, he wanted to fireball it. I swear, if someone had come up and said, it's my birthday, he would have fireballed them.
Was it you who thunderclapped as well? Did you thunderclap?
Yes.
And
That's
how it started, because you thunderclapped upstairs, and that made the ceiling cave in. That's how you saw it. So you thunderclapped, and they fell down, and then you threw fireball to compound the thunderclap, and then you all got kicked out of town for setting fire to the inn.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I don't like playing conventional characters or those that play by the rules.
I don't know why. This is just reminding me of like one of the most absurd image I've ever had whilst running a fight was a group of characters who got kind of beset by wolves, and for other reasons they had a wheelbarrow full of pies, just like full to the brim of pies. Pies had become a theme in the game for no reason other than just what the players wanted to introduce, and one of them was playing I think a goblin, so quite tiny. And one of them was just getting very happy with something like cone of cold or some kind of ice area of effect thing. When one of the wolves is over there, and Wolf managed the deck save. Their friend in the wheelbarrow didn't, so just became frozen in a wheelbarrow of pies for the rest of the combat. Just unable to really move or contribute, unfortunately.
Oh, amazing. Man, I was sort of remember we did Rogue Trader, which is basically Warhammer 40k RPG, and one of the guys, my mate's SKB, he was very much he played his character to the line, literally whatever his character's traits were, that's what he did. He played his character, and one of the characters he had was like this sort of brash mercenary, you know, all guns blazing type guy, and we were in we were in this dropship. And he was just like, you know, we're going over this sort of like compound, and he's like, I'm gonna jump out and land on the wall, and the DM's like, but you know, we're moving, the dropship's moving, and he's like, yeah, it's all right, I'll do it, and he jumped out and rolled a 1 and died, and it was just like, well, there you go, man. If you jump out of a moving ship, you're gonna fucking splatter against the wall. That
was so nearly me in a campaign once, because I was playing this character who I think had shot an arrow at some corrupt guards or something, tried to hide. The guards had noticed me, and my instinct was to go to, oh, I'm just going to pretend that I was sliding on the roof and falling and accidentally like let my arrow loose. So, and then I think I got like a 2 on the dex save rather than a 1. So a 1, I was just going to fall over, and I was already pretty hurt, and that fall was going to kill me. So in that case, my character would have killed because they'd pretended to fall off a roof too hard, which wouldn't have been the best kind of, like a little bit fitting for that character, but I am very glad that she didn't die doing that.
Oh man, yeah. It's just like I haven't played like RPGs. I played, obviously we played the Rogue Trader one we used to play regularly with Ben doing it. D&D I hadn't played since I was a kid. We did a Call of Cthulhu one, a game with Ben sort of running it, and that was really good. Actually, I wasn't expecting to enjoy that one, but that was really good because it's really counterintuitive, because you don't want high rolls in Call of Cthulhu games. You basically don't want to understand anything. As soon as you understand stuff, you go mad. So that was actually a really good one. But having started DMing, it takes up your life. It literally becomes something that is a part of you. Like it literally, I dream about it, and we've got a thing called World Anvil now, which is I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. Yeah, World Anvil. Yeah. We've got a World Anvil, so I build maps. I've got sort of like, we've got storylines in there. We've got interactive maps and things that we're going to do. I spend so much time looking into these things and doing this, and it's just like every other waking moment of my life, I'm thinking about, right, so what's going to happen next? They're going to do this. They might do that. I have to do this, and it's just like, and then obviously because the text messages are still going as well, it's always going on, man. So it's just like, I didn't realize how much it can absorb your life. It's just there all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally know that feeling. Like I've finding like some different systems to D&D has definitely, for me, like freed up bits of my brain a little bit. Like kind of trying to look for things that I know that I won't kind of build quite as much in advance, or I don't get into that habit for some reason, because I'm just like much more free and easy with it. But that said, like I'm currently making a series of in-world bingo calls for Thursday, because that's just like a thing that now needs to happen in that game, and I've decided that I'm going to kind of relay world lore, fun, and threats through a bingo game with the characters, because it's just fun to build different things. And like, yeah, I've definitely been that DM in the past where you just get too excited by the world building, and you make something that is like way bigger than your players are ever going to actually manage to engage with or see, and you write far too much stuff because you just get too excited about all of the things that your world can be. Yeah. And I've definitely had to like try and train myself down a bit from doing too much of that.
Yeah, I ended up writing about 2,000 words on Dragonborn society, making up this huge socialistic feminist tribal society with queens that rely on verbal contracts rather than written agreements. And why would they do this? Well, if it's a tribal society, they've lost everything, so no contracts. Okay, everything's verbal agreements. How do they ensure verbal agreements? Well, they've got wizards. How's a wizard ensure magic? And it's just like,
yeah, we had a long me and Pete had a long conversation about Dragonborn history and how it would sort of pan out, and I'm sitting there, well, it's going to be kind of like the Native Americans in Native Americans in America and stuff, and how they were pushed out of their homes, and some sort of they had treaties that were sort of did this, and they joined wars and then were lost and blah blah blah, and it was like, you spent ages just sort of going into things that people are literally not going to bother reading. but to you it matters.
Yeah, I mean, like, I follow Dragonborns, like, their heritage was defined by their mother. So basically, like, no matter, if a red dragonborn went with a golden dragonborn who was female, then their child would be golden. So therefore, I thought, well, okay, probably that society would be matriarchal.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, then you got, okay, then what about the pure bloods? What about two golden dragons? And that would make them more pure? And they got, okay, we've got elements of racism now. That's great. And what? But we're nowhere near Dragonborn society at the moment, are we? No.
Well, that's the thing is, we're currently on an island in the middle of the map, and we're in day 4, I think, of actual game. We've been playing for 3 months, but we're on day 4. I think we're gonna start streaming again at some point soon, but it's literally a case of, the world I've built is like you said, a bit big for the fact that I don't think they're going to get around to most of it. So there's going to have to be some sub things going on with other groups at some point in time, I think, to sort of kind of fill it all out. But it's very easy just to sort of jump into it too much.
Yeah, it's so easy. Something that I've started like doing a lot more, partially because at the moment the games that I'm running are deliberately like maybe 6 sessions long, like kind of mini arcs, just to like dip my toe into different things, and try to like practice some habits that aren't about like slow burn mysteries, etc. And what I do is I do session zeros with the players, and I'll have told them like what I'm thinking the tone of the world will be and like some rough ideas. But normally in session 0, I'll go, okay, how is your character connected to the world, like enemies, friends, everything in between? What are they committed to? Like, what are their values? Are there specific places they're protecting, or specific groups that they're attached to that they want to defend or uphold the values of? How are your characters conflicted? Like, where do your goals and other things come into tension with each other? And now what I've done a lot more is base a lot of what the action of the campaign is going to be off the back of what they say. So if someone goes, oh, well, like I've got this arch enemy who's a necromancer or something, or does a lot of experiments with sentient objects, then I'll go, okay, so I've got that over there, but this person has this best friend who does this, but you've all made characters who have like hidden identities or secrets in the past, so we'll link that up, because role players that do that kind of thing. And that's been really interesting, trying to kind of let go a little bit and let whatever lore the players want to bring to the table shape things a lot more. And that's definitely, A, it's alleviated some of the work for me, and B, it means that obviously the engagement is so much more immediate, because this NPC is the one that they told me about last week, or this group is the thing that they created. So I found that to be kind of handy in practicing not planning or overwriting too much.
How do you deal with conflicting alignments? So in the game that we are, because we're all pretty new, I made restrictions on what alignments people could be, because I've been in a game where there was an evil player who didn't tell us that he was an evil player, and as much as the gotcha moment was quite amusing, it kind of derailed the entire sort of thing.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
there's like a few different things. There are some players where, because I know their skills and what they're really good at, I trust them. Like, for instance, there is a player I know who plays like lawful good to the hilt. However, and sometimes that means their characters can kind of be assholes.
Yeah.
But it's somehow it's a hard thing to like really nail down. But they're very good at playing characters that are lawful good assholes, but it never feels like they as a player are being mean to another player. It never feels like they're trying to obstruct what another player is doing. They follow a very careful line.
Was he a paladin by any chance?
Oh yeah, of course they were a paladin. And so for instance, like with that player, I'm like, I know you're really good at this, so I'm not gonna worry about kind of what alignment you're playing or that you're gonna like do lawful good too much, because even good alignments and chaotic alignments can be issues. It's not just like evil ones. I don't think I've run a game where someone has had an evil alignment, and if I knew someone who wanted to do that, I'd be like, let's mess around with some one shots and stuff. Something like that being kept from other players, I don't know if I would probably go a bit more open on that, but that's just how I run stuff. Like, I am totally fine with there being reveals about a character, but a lot of the players that I play with are quite good at not.
Oh, frozen up. Matt. Frozen up.
Other than that, like, normally just like, I will always kind of, if someone wants to play something kind of dark, I'll be like, okay, I still need to know what your character cares about, because then I kind of know what will drive them. I also know how to like work with them in world, and it can't be just like total like nihilism, because I've encountered as a player characters who are just like so nihilistic that you end up not knowing how to engage with them as a player or as a DM.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, kind of knowing about their connections, and I will normally push for like, okay, but I'd like for you to already know this character a little bit. Can we kind of flesh out at least something there so that we have some things to build on? Because even if you want to play someone with some like morally gray and stuff, is absolutely fine, but at the core, people have to understand that they are playing together. And something that's like a improv principle that I really like in terms of tabletop games is make the other people look good, which in improv is all about like, don't just take up all the space, but like show off what the other people can do with you, and if you do that, you'll look good. And for me, tabletop games, like the way you are telling a story together, it's a similar thing of like, find opportunities to shine a light on the amazing stuff someone else is doing, and you can do that no matter what your alignment is. And so for me, provided that the player has the right attitude and outlook, and yeah, I'm normally kind of a little bit more open, because for instance, I play with some people who do not like experiencing betrayal in a party or experiencing PvP in a party, because for them, what they want from a game is a very different experience. And also like it's for them, for whatever reason, it's not a pleasant experience to put their trust even as a character in another character and then be told, oh no, you shouldn't have done that. There's
a lot of sort of drip through into real life and stuff. Like that's one of the we had a moment when we first started where there was a lot of arguments because things happened that they weren't expecting from other characters, and the actual real life people started getting annoyed with each other because they were like, well, why would you do that? And then they're going, well, it's the character, and then there's a lot of arguments, and you have to sort of, I think at the start you've got to sort of, I had to set out some rules at the I had to basically go, right, these are the rules and this is how it works, and you basically have to adhere to this. Like my rules are story, enjoyment, and party cohesion. So basically all of those things have to work together. If they don't, then the party's going to fall apart. And it doesn't matter that if your character's an asshole. If you're being an asshole to everybody else, then you're feeding the party, and it's a team game. You got to do it. Yeah.
I've played in a game where someone else was, I assume their alignment was evil, judging by the things they were doing. And because it's someone that I've known for a long time, someone that I trust, their evilness wasn't manifesting as screwing over everyone's plans because they had the same ultimate goal. It was just, they might not help as much as you wanted them to unless you were like, okay, you can have 70% of my gold when we get out of here. You can have 75% of it when we get out of here. And there was even a point where like my character was on death saves and his character was leaning over me, trying to, I think, rolling performance or deception checks to make it look like he was trying to heal me, but secretly he was just trying to stop anyone else from getting close to help me, which probably sounds horrible because I trusted him, because like of the way that he'd done this, and because like we knew each other well as players and such. Like I was saying like, it'll be a shame if she dies, but I completely respect this and I find this a hilarious move to pull in combat. But it's so dependent on what people are comfortable with.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
So what are you running at the minute? What's going on at the minute?
I'm running a small campaign of Quest, which is my first time running Quest, and I kind of got into it because it's very mechanics light. I don't know how familiar any of you are with it.
No, sorry, no, it's a new one on me.
So basically, it's very kind of stripped back. You're rolling a d20, but you don't have any character stats. It's always a flat 20 roll. And you have you start with 6 abilities, and as you go on, you get more abilities. They kind of have talent trees for different roles, like Doctor, Spy, Invoker, etc. And it's very story footed. So like when you see the stat block for a creature, you'll see the average damage they do, the number of hit points they have, any spells or special abilities like invisibility, for instance. And then there's just like a couple of paragraphs of sample descriptions of what they're like and things like that. And it's been, so far, it's been really fun because there's basically the 20 is really good, everything goes well. 1 is bad, things don't go well. But there's like, if you roll between a 6 and a 10, the DM or guide gives you a tough choice, which is an option between 2 ways of succeeding, but with drawbacks. And that's been really interesting. And also, because it's so stripped back, when someone's gone like, just invented lore in the game and gone like, oh yeah, well, we're in a chase scene, and so we're probably competing against this group of pirates, these ninjas, these princesses, these mermaids, and these cowboys. I've just been able to go, cool, got it, know exactly what's happening. And it's very it's very freewheeling. It's been really fun to see what players come up with character wise, because there's no set species, races, or anything like that. So people have gone, I would like to be a person made entirely of glitter, and I would like to be someone who just has 3 big eyes for a face. So that's been really fun. I'm running D&D at the moment for the Undergods stream, but that's got about 2-3 episodes left, and that's been really fun. And that's also involved a lot of homebrewing, because each player character in that is the descendant of a god, and so has like their own special unique ability and their own relationship with their god. And that's been a really fun kind of element of the world to play with. And then there's just all the games that I'm like reading that I haven't found like the space or time to run. Like there's this beautiful 1-pager called Font that is just like a beautiful one-shot that's really super meaningful, about journeys and change and sacrifice and stuff like that. And then like loads of other games like Dialect. I bought Once Upon a Time recently, because like every single game designer I know has been like mentioning it in chats about card games. and so I'm keen to play that as soon as I can. I've got One Night Ultimate Werewolf, and I'm really interested in like the slightly different werewolf mechanics. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking at the moment.
Yes, I'm. My apologies. We're getting trolled on our Twitch channel. Some people were trying to be funny bastards. Hence why I have had to move the chat out of the way, because we were getting some annoying things. Some people obviously don't have anything better to do with themselves on a Sunday night than to be assholes on Twitch. Yeah. So yeah, if you're yeah. So yeah.
Can I quickly ask something? You were saying about the mechanics in Quest being quite freeform and giving you options. Have you ever looked at Fantasy Flight do a Star Wars system?
Genesis.
Edge of the Empire, yeah, with Edge of the Empire and so, and it's 3 games based on it. But it's in common with Fantasy Flight. It's kind of got lots of custom dice. So I don't know if you've ever seen X-Wing, which is their tabletop game.
I think I've seen it like from a distance at conventions.
Yeah, I use it as a reference. I've played it quite a lot. It's a little bit of one of my obsessions. But they did. I never got a chance to run it. I always wanted to, and they have several sets of custom dice. And their idea is you never do an opposed roll against the DM. What you do is you roll the dice that oppose each other, and you cancel stuff out. But you have, as well as successes and failures, you have positives or negatives, so you can fail but have a positive outcome from it, and then kind of like throws it onto the GM and the player between them to make that work. And I just didn't know if that was something you ever come across and how that would frame, because it's not as freeform as Quest, but it's got some of that concept. It's got some of the interesting concepts of consequences as well as success, which I always thought was weird.
So gradations of success, isn't there?
Yeah. That sounds really cool. It's not one I'm familiar with, and like weirdly, paradoxically almost, the reason why I really like it is in Quest is because it's one of the things I struggle with the most as a GM. Is that whole thing of like, success but a complication and stuff, because sometimes you're like, okay, someone's rolled a success but a complication for climbing up a wall, or someone's rolled a failure but a success for jumping onto a boat. And you feel like that pressure to come up with something clever. And so any system that's getting me to like practice that muscle a bit more, I'm quite into.
Because they mix it up with what they call their destiny pool as well. So you have, you have flippable tokens. And if it's a white token, then the player can use it, but they flip the token. It's then available for the GM to use later on against them. And so I always thought it's a cool idea is that you have lots of guidance in there about where it's going. You can't just try and spin it on your head, but you also have options with consequences that that if you have a really cool start to the game, it could come back and bite you horribly.
That's cool. That reminds me a little bit of have you played Star Trek Adventures?
I've got it to play. I haven't had a chance to play it yet. I've kind of consumed most of the books. Because I had a few of them already, and I picked up a lot of them on the rest on the Humble Bundle that they did recently.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So I've got all the PDFs sitting there, and I keep sort of going to it. I just need to find some victims.
That has a nice kind of, that just reminded me of momentum versus threat in Star Trek Adventures, where it's kind of nice because you just have these little tokens and you're going like, yeah, it's fine. We've got enough momentum. Let's like spend some and let's make sure we do really well. And every time you're doing well, you just see like that threat stacking up and the stakes getting higher.
Yeah, there seems to be this move within the role-playing industry for kind of gradations of success. Like the Alien role-playing game has got like the stress mechanics, where you get a little bit of stress and that adds to your role, but then you also introduce the potential for critical failures, where things get really fun. And like I said, just picked the Coriolis Third Horizon role-playing game, and that seems to have like these kind of you pass but not too good. So it's like the pass badly or you'll fail well. So yeah, it seems kind of almost introducing more role-playing elements where the kind of players and the GM have to describe, well, yeah, you didn't do it, but this happens. It kind of that describe more about it, and that kind of again just engages that role-playing element.
Sorry, tell you what, man. There were some abs. We had a.
I just had a quick look. Yeah.
there was a load of trolls, and I've just banned 3 people, which I've never had to do before.
I've not got it open, so sorry, I was unaware. But
it's just I'm just people, you're watching this, and I'm warning you now. If you're not respectful, you'll get banned. It's as simple as that. I won't have that sort of.
Course, yeah.
It's just uncalled for. Okay. Right.
We're back.
Yes, and we're back. Mark, what were you saying? I think because we cut out before you sort of carried on.
Oh god, now I've got to try and rewind in my head. I think it's the thing that makes in-person or tabletop role-playing, where it's all people versus people, much more interesting, is everything can be quite fuzzy because you can go off the rails. Whereas obviously, while playing a computer game can be very polished and enjoyable, it has to have very much defined paths and outcomes, because computers, no matter how cool they look and how shiny and impressive they can be under the right circumstances, they can't deal with random stuff going out of control as well as a human can do. And it's just that concept of, you do something stupid in a computer game up to a certain point, it's just going to kill you. Whereas in a game, for example, you can call for someone you say, are you sure you want to do that? Or does anyone want to, I don't know, push them out of the way before they can shoot something? And it becomes, it's a more cooperative experience, which is what's much more enjoyable. And whether you want to go for heavy on rules or light on rules, you always have the ability for someone to step in and derail it before it goes to hell.
Yep.
I feel it's been targeted.
Why would that be, Pete? Why would that be? I think somebody thinks we're playing Among Us. That's why we're getting lots of random kids basically being idiots.
Because the last stream was Among Us. Yeah,
so they're just sort of
like it cases, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Because when I first looked at Twitch, it thought we were broadcasting Among Us.
Yeah. So we're
just only once I jumped in.
Yeah. So yeah, that's so annoying. I just this is completely random, but the things that really annoy me is one, trolling in general is just it pisses me off. But two, when we do play Among Us, hacking and cheaters, it just doesn't make sense because it's not even ranked or anything. So it just seems pointless. It's very odd that people will do it. I just don't get. I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Some people just like pissing other people off. Pardon my French.
That's probably true. Yeah, it's just frustrating to say the least. Okay, that's made me lose my train of thought now. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Well, actually, I will say, that's one thing about role-playing games, is that there is never a winner. No one wins at a role-playing game. It's you win when you collaborate, and it's not just one person. Either the group wins or you all fail. Yeah. And it's not like the GM is there to win or beat you, because the GM's role is for you all to have fun. I was running a game of Mech Warrior a few years ago, and the best time I had was when all the players were sat around planning this heist, and I was just sat back listening to them going, I was kind of planning it all out, and I was answering the odd question, just in the background, well, if we do this, can we do that? And I was having the time of my life because they were having fun.
Well, that's it for me. That's the thing. It's like, I do like adversarial sort of games, and so you get if you've ever played a board game called Descent, it's like a dungeon crawler RPG, but it's adversarial in that the overlord, so that basically the DM, if he wins, he gets loot and he gets experience and he gets cards and things like that. So as the games master in that one, it's in your interest to try and throw out what you can within the rules that you've got, so you can win. So I enjoy stuff like that. It's the same in what's it called, Imperial Assault, which is basically the Star Wars version of it. It's sort of the person who's in charge of the Imperial guys gets bonuses for winning missions and things like that. But with D&D, I don't want people dying because I I want there to be a good storyline. One, it's just good for me in general, and two, it's better watching if you're streaming it and things like that. You don't want people just dying all the time. And two, it's just sort of, you kind of grow fond of the people you have, and you don't really want them to sort of. That's why it becomes slightly. I can't even think of the word. I despondent whenever they do something stupid, really stupid, and I'm like, but you don't want to do that. And part of me is trying not to throw in too many hints, and then sometimes I just have to, because I'm like, right, they have to do this way, because I don't want to steamroll anybody. They can do whatever they want in my game. So I'll sort of push things. I'll put out clues to things, but if they don't take them, then that's sort of completely up to them. Because I don't want to steamroll them. I want it to be literally they can do whatever the hell they want, but then you do get times where they do something completely stupid and you're just like, oh my god, you're missing out on all of the information that you need.
I mean, also I think the hard thing is that sometimes people playing, not necessarily just D&D, I've played other role-playing games where the person who's running it doesn't want to flex with the players. They want to keep pushing you back onto something because they've got an idea in their head about how things should run, and that becomes a losing game because it pushes everyone against the DM. It doesn't become a fun thing anymore. It becomes adversarial, that you want to do things and they either say no, or the worst thing I ever did was a situation where I got some really great dice rolls and my character did really well at something, and it turned out in their head it was supposed to go a different way, and we walked in, sat down, and they retconned what had happened the week before, and I think me and two others just got up and walked out, and the whole group fell apart because they just literally just sat and stewed and said, well, that's not the way I wanted it to go. So they sat down. So last time this happened, and just got up, walked out, didn't argue at all, because they'd written this story and they wanted us to kind of just play our parts in their head. And of course, it doesn't work that way, because if you're role playing, everyone gets a vote.
Yep.
And the dice get a vote as well. And the dice get a vote as well. That's part of the thing. So someone can do something really stupid, but it works. And that changes the tone of the whole thing and takes you off in a different direction. And if you can't roll with that, you probably shouldn't be DMing. And it will probably, it's the only way I can think of to lose in role playing, really, is because it breaks the contract between everyone that's there to have fun.
Have you ever seen a YouTube channel called Everything D&D, where they do stories for the time I got one over on the DM, or the time that my character got such and such, or did something like that. It's called All Thing D&D. I think it's on YouTube, and it's basically people send in stories about their experiences, and this guy narrates them. And I watch them, and sometimes I read them, or read them. I watch them, and I'm like, this guy who's telling the story, it's meant to be like he's the guy who's the downtrodden, or he's the guy who's something wrong has happened, and I'm just like, but you're being an asshole. You're the one who's causing the issues and stuff. So we had one where a guy was evil, and he basically was annoyed because the DM turned around to everybody in the group and said he's evil, basically to give them a heads up. So he basically started doing stuff to cause problems for as a thing, but they made it out because he was outed as evil, that was a big issue and stuff. And there's other ones where they're talking about steamrolling and how you've got a DM who's got certain things and he's trying to sort of move them in one direction, and then you've got that character who just doesn't want to adhere to that and wants to do everything he wants. And it's just like, yeah, but you sound kind of unreasonable. You don't sound like you're wanting to sort of, you kind of want to do what you want to do. You're not doing what maybe the group wants to do, or what sort of, it's in the theme of the whole thing. And it's there's some good stories on it, but you do get the odd one where you're just like, yeah, you're just being an asshole.
Yeah, my feeling is just like, granted, like a lot of DMs do and GMs in other systems do a lot of work and put in a lot of effort to make things fun for people, but if you're a GM, it's not your story, it's everyone's story, then plus the dice to randomize it. Additionally, you're not like the protagonist of this gaming group, just as none of the players are like, their character is not the protagonist of this thing. It's all about it being cooperative. And yeah, it just on the one hand it baffles me, on the other hand I can see where like if people start playing like D&D or start playing tabletop games with certain people, then they will just think, oh, this is the normal dynamic, this is just how these games work, which is such a great shame, because it just means that kind of like spreads a little bit, and it's active work to make sure it doesn't happen as much as it can do.
How did you introduce new players to your 250-hour epic? I mean, how would you describe, like, a completely new player? Right, you're in this 250-hour epic. Go ahead, have fun.
So it started with the fact that I condensed the player's handbook down into about 8 pages.
Okay, that's about 300 pages down to 8.
Yeah, I mean, I say condensed. Obviously, some things did not make it in, but it was very, and also I was doing it in easy read, which is a type of writing that's meant to be kind of basically easier for people, say, with learning disabilities to read. And it's actually like really good practice, because it just means you get to the point and you're clear and you're not using jargon. And to be honest, the main thing was going like, you will have a character sheet. It will tell you what your character is good at and what they're bad at, and you'll be rolling a dice and taking the numbers from that sheet and adding them to the dice. You'll have people who are with you who will be able to tell you which dice it is and that kind of thing. And then it was just largely, most of the time, someone is going to describe a world to you, and then you can say what you'd like to do, and then you can roll to see if you do it, and then they'll describe what happens, and you'll keep kind of going in that way. And then sometimes there'll be sections that are much more ordered because you're in a fight or something, and in that case you can do like a small thing, do a big thing, and you can move, and that's what you can do. We like very specifically, new players could be rogues or they could be barbarians. They were not spellcasters of any kind. They didn't have like spellcasting subclasses or anything, because it was like, that's just a blanket rule. New players do not get spells. But mostly it was like, I think about, like, say it was maybe 50-50, just giving like a very stripped back, this is kind of what happens, and also like an explanation of this is what the things on your character sheet mean. And half of it was just being very like calm, friendly, sitting them next to someone and going like, this is this person, they're going to help you out, do you want anything to drink, and just making them feel like calm and relaxed and like in good hands. It was a challenge at times to kind of communicate to people what it really was. It's one of those things where it's so much easier if you can show someone. If you can just show someone like an hour of a game, obviously they're not going to then understand what all tabletop games are, but it's way easier than trying to actually like describe the experience of playing one to someone. But that was largely how we kind of approached it.
Yeah, I mean, also what I found interesting was that, this was something that was presented to an audience. Now, when people think of theatre, they think of like props and actors, but this was 4 or 5 people on a table on a stage, just narrating what was happening. And found that was quite like, what was the reaction like to that?
It kind of depended like hour to hour, because for one thing, like we did a lot of narration, but also it was a lot of people who were very happy, even, I mean, still sat down, but vocal, like improvising dialogue and such like with each other. I made a very conscious decision to be that person, and I played a bard, and I took a ukulele with me, and I improvised when we needed like a song of rest or something. I would improvise things because I was like, this will kind of,
as a bard, how many people did you?
More theatrical things you can do, and some people, like, there were people who would come for an hour, and then because like it had left on a cliffhanger or something, they'd buy a ticket for the next hour, and they just like kind of keep coming back because they wanted to know what happened. And I mean, like, obviously some people it wasn't like their thing, or like, because also it's at the Fringe, you get a lot of people who just kind of walk in because they're trying a thing out and then it's not what they're expecting or not their bag. But actually, in terms of it being like entertainment for people to watch, people really got into it, because I don't know, I could talk for like 2 hours on various things. Like, I know very fancy performance art type groups where if it was them sat behind a table like describing a story, it would have won awards, because they're known for, because the stuff I've seen them do before, because of reputations and stuff. And the difficulty of telling theatre people that this game can actually be like theatre, was like probably one of the trickiest things about doing it in that context. Also because we were, in our first year, we were one of maybe like 4 or 5 tabletop game based shows at the Fringe, but we'd made a conscious decision. We were the only ones listed under theatre. Every single other one was listed under comedy, and would either be like a very quick fire adventure done in an hour, or it was an adventure played out by comedians. And whilst they were playing a game, it was a vehicle for comedy, and kind of comedy was the front footed thing, whereas we had the comedy that like emerges out of D&D, but equally really like intense drama and emotional stuff happening. And so that was also like an interesting thing to try and kind of explain. But yeah, normally once we could show people what it was, then it just made sense to them.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Right, I think we're going to leave it there. It's been an hour and a half. It's been very interesting. It's not very often that we get to geek out about gaming, tabletop gaming and RPGs. So yeah, that's been very good. So thank you very much, Chloe. Have you got any websites or any socials or anything that you want to sort of kind of promote?
Yes, thank you. At Chloe Mashiter on Twitter is where you can find out about my games and my streams. I'm also going to be shortly canvassing, so I've got a few ideas of streams I'd like to do, but I want to find out what will be most interesting and useful for people out there. Rollflipdraw.co.uk or rollflipdraw.itch.io is where you can see my tabletop games, and I'm releasing that bundle of solo games tomorrow. If you look at my Twitter, it's also got a link to my mailing list where you get early access to games each month, you get recommendations of other games, blogs, things like that. And twitch.tv/rollflipstream is where I'm going to be doing a lot more streams very shortly. Currently, it's a couple of like odd streams that happen every so often, where I'm making up songs about people's like tabletop characters and stuff like that for them. But if you keep an eye on that, there's some announcements and some more things to come there. I think that is kind of my general slew of things. Brilliant.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So that's it. That's our D&D. Make sure you try out a False Hydra. Don't look it up because it'll ruin it for you. But find somebody who knows about it and get them to run one for you.
You don't need to convince me not to read mechanics and stat lines.
It's just because it's all mystery and stuff. So if you can find somebody who'll run it, it's generally a one shot. Might take a bit, but it's an interesting one to do. But yes, so for tonight, I've been Matt Geary. With me has been Peter Ray Allison.
Good night, everyone. Take care of each other and stay safe.
Mark Canty.
Stay safe. Have a great week.
And our great guest, Chloe Mashiter.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.